Order the Plan and Zone Commission meeting of tonight, Monday, July 1st. I'd like everybody in the audience to please turn your cell phones off as they could interfere with our audio transmission. We'll start off with our public hearing. We have two items. Roll call, please.
Connell's excused. Hepner. Here. Ingram.
Present.
Johnson.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Lammers.
Present.
Manus. Med.
Here.
Bransgard.
Here.
Reinhardt.
Here.
Tallman here. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. First item is case number REZ 19-09 is a request to Mark Cross to rezone 146.98 acres MOL, a property located between River Drive and Telegraph Road, surrounded roughly by Wisconsin Avenue and South Vermont Avenue to the east and west, respectively, from R1 to R2, single-family residential, to S-AG, agricultural district. Brandon?
Good evening, Brandon Melton with Community Planning. Just gonna give a brief overview. Mark's looking to rezone the property to establish a commercial horse stable. Up to this point, we did not address that in the code. Commercial horse stable, we had horse stables allowed as a residential in R1 for private use only. So we're addressing that through a revision to the code in the ordinance change, but that's separate from this case. But would allow him to do also a horse training facility is the primary use, an indoor horse training facility, and then other ancillary uses. Currently, the comprehensive plan future land use shows agricultural reserve for the majority of the area being proposed to SAG. There's also some open space and then a little bit of residential general included in that as well. So here's sort of the aerial view of that area. You can see West River Drive, where West River Drive meets Ricker Hill, and then Telegraph to the north. So Mark obviously owns all this property. He owns the parcel sort of between of the southern block, the northern parcel. He owns between that too, and has talked about doing horse trails through that area as well. But currently would need to rezone to ag for that. There's the map of the future land use, as I noted before. But then current zoning, R2, that fronts on West River Drive, and then R1 to the north. And then off of Telegraph, all three of those parcels are R1 currently. Kind of looks like there's a sliver off to the west of those parcels to the north, but that's just a mapping error. Those are actually zoned agricultural. Definitions for each of those districts, and then I'd take any questions if you have them right now.
Commissioners, any questions at this point? Seeing none, thank you, Brandon.
Thanks.
Would the petitioner like to step forward at this time and explain his project?
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Cross.
Could you please pull the microphone a little closer? We're having a hard time hearing you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Cross. Is that better? Okay. My wife and I built a home on that property a few years ago with the intent of eventually making a horse arena for my own personal use. I currently own a 4-time world champion, and here in the Midwest, one of the biggest problems we have is being able to train your horses through the winter and on hot summer days and when it rains. So that's the basic function is going to be for my own use. But in order to justify an arena the size that I'm talking about, I'm going to supplement that with boarding some horses, but we're not going to overdo it. I currently have 4 folks, full-time staff, that take care of horses in Comanche. Those folks will be coming down to this area because this will be the primary operation. The operation I have in Comanche is basically a breeding operation along with the young horses and raise them up. I'm certainly willing to take any questions you may have.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Yes, thank you. With horses, there's a lot of byproducts generated by the horses. What type of containment or fluid containment or solids containment or haul off or odor control do you foresee implementing in this facility?
The basic design of the stables themselves have a pretty nice drainage system that'll bring everything to a center point that will be able to remove the manure and the urine. You know, a lot of that basically is going to go. To capture the urine, I plan on building a wetlands. So the main urine nitrogen will first go into the wetlands. I've actually, when I met with my engineer, the wetlands will be designed in 3 stages. And so by the time it would hit a body of water that will flow into a creek, it'll be pretty clean. I currently own a 62-acre wetlands in Comanche that I built, and the whole purpose of that wetlands was there was a former nitrogen plant just up the hill that polluted the whole area with nitrate, nitrogen, and ammonia, and it's been very successful. And that was back in 1999, so I've got some experience in wetlands. I'll do my utmost to make sure that that water quality is good. Manure, a lot of that will be hauled off. We have manure spreaders, we have hay fields. Manure will either be applied on our own hay fields, but I have a farmer that farms the ground. He'd be more than happy to have it. So it'll be applied.
Have you checked with our environmental people to determine, excuse me, whether an NPDES permit is going to be required for discharge into navigable waterways or streams from the byproduct liquid waste that comes from your animals?
I already have an NPDES pond up at the plant that I currently operate right now, so I am familiar about NPDES.
Okay.
I don't see it as being a requirement, but through our due diligence, if that is required, then we will apply for the proper application.
All right, fine, thank you.
Staff, I assume that you will be reviewing that portion of this. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any additional questions of the petitioner? Commissioner Lammers.
Will you be abutting any residential properties, or will there be enough green space between the facility you're planning on building and the neighboring residential?
Currently, the way it appears that it's being written is any existing structures, I won't be able to put a fence within 150 feet. And when I first met with my neighbors, we've had 2 meetings, and it was unanimous. Everyone was in favor of it. I do plan on incorporating a buffer between those houses. I'd like to plant some trees and maybe some native prairie grass and that kind of stuff. And it'll be an easement to my neighbors, but if they want to use it for their own enjoyment, that'd be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak in favor of this petition? Please step forward. Would anybody like to speak in opposition? If you want to speak in favor, you can still come up.
I'm William Greenfield. I have a property down the street from him, and I've looked at his papers and everything, and his what he's wanting to do, and I'm in favor of it. I think it'll add good character to the community. So
Thank you.
I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak in favor or opposition? Final call.
I'm a neighbor and I'm in favor.
Can you please come up and identify yourself?
My name's Christy Pratz. I'm a neighbor. My house backs up to that land, and I don't have a problem with it. My kids are kind of excited about it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, we will close case number REZ 19-09. And in theory, it should return to us in a couple weeks. Thank you. I appreciate your attendance. Move on to case number ORD 18-08, request of the City of Damport to amend various sections of Title 17 of the Damport City Code entitled Zoning. All right.
That's a typo on my part. It should be ORD 1902.
I thought so, but
Why it's still in 2018.
we'll make corrections.
Okay, so I'll spare you the going through the proposed ordinance line by line. I'm sure you would appreciate that. By and large, most of these changes that we're making we consider cleanup. We are proposing some minor changes, and no matter how many times you read this ordinance before you actually apply it, when you're actually applying it to real projects, that's when the challenges really come. Things arise. Commercial horse stables is one example, but really design standards and things like that. So my intent is to kind of hit you with the high points, but if you have specific questions about the ordinance itself, I'm happy to answer those. I did provide the ordinance with a highlighted text, and underlined is proposed, and strike through would be deleted. Just kind of want to talk about the use matrix. As we mentioned, commercial horse stables was one use that we created. The other are uses that we thought, well, that probably should be located in a certain classification. One is amusement facility indoor. Michael's Fun World right now on 76 is currently zoned industrial, and so we tried through this effort not to make properties non-conforming. They have an outdoor component and an indoor component. We also saw animal care facilities, thought like dog pounds and things like that should be allowed in industrial. They tend to want to be located away from residential properties, and so we are proposing that change. Dwelling multifamily allowed in the IMU. We made some late changes in the zoning ordinance, and not everything got updated, so we're correcting those. There, of course, is the keeping of equine and equestrian facility, and also government facilities and public safety facilities being allowed in SOS, which is the open space, which tends to be government managed lands. And you can see a parking lot. We did get a proposal for a parking lot in industrial, and we thought that should be a permitted use. Allowing a restaurant in SOS2, sometimes we have golf course facilities and things like that that have restaurants, and we thought that should be a permitted use. One other one is, this was a late addition by City Council that we didn't want to have, as what is the vernacular term we use, is pole barns in all districts. We think they're appropriate in some districts, but not in all. I expect this to change a little bit, but this would be in our garage section. And so we'll continue to refine that, but there is language in there for that. The other big change that we made was regarding zoning applications. This zoning ordinance is very, very prescriptive, which is a good thing. And we did have policy that we did. We put a sign on a piece of property. We notified people within 200 feet, and we hold neighborhood meetings. So we still intend to do that, but what we want to put in the zoning ordinance is that it's not required by law, and there's a reason for that. Is because it's not required by state law. And me and my colleague Matt were deposed during the Portillo's incident, and really was an attempt by the attorney to look through we prevailed, but to look through any possible misstep that we would have made through that process. And so we do not want a situation where a sign got removed or somebody removed a sign, and then this whole action is for naught. So we want to make sure we're following state law, but we also want to indicate that these are really policies, not necessarily what's required by law. Again, mentioning something being very prescriptive, we wanted to add a little bit of flexibility in the site plan code. So when a new development comes in and we look at that for consistency with all the regulations and design standards, certainly those who have designed properties, you might need a little bit of flexibility. And again, with the code being so prescriptive, you know, maybe you can't put an entire hedgerow of landscaping in this area. So we wanted to build in some minor flexibility in certain circumstances. When the weather was nice, we started getting nice weather. We started getting single-family dwellings in. I can tell you that this transparency requirement has probably been one of the most ones that we've had challenges with administering, and that's, we get a little pushback from the home builders, which is fine. We've been committed to refining this zoning ordinance to make it the best we can. We had several meetings with home builders. And really, when you think about a dwelling, the only design standards we have is that you have minimum transparency requirements. And when I say transparency, it means the glass in a building or doors, as you can see there. And this would apply to the front facade, so the portion facing the main street. But we only have two design standards, one being transparency and the other being a garage width requirement, or maximum. When we met with the home builders, they were rightfully so quick to point out that there's other elements that can make and we're really concerned with how a house looks from the street. There are other elements that can be incorporated, such as change in materials. Transparency could be one of them. Roof peaks could be another one. So we didn't have enough time to get it in this current draft. We intend to bring it back in a couple weeks. Is really going to a point system, like, you know, minimum transparency would be 5%. However, you get another point if you do a brick course up to a certain height. So we are working on that. I know there are members of the home builder community in the audience here that I believe he wants to speak. So we are working on that as well. So staff will provide its recommendation at the July 16th meeting, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioner Lammers.
Hey, Ryan, on the 17.14.040 zoning text and map amendment, you addressed the neighborhood meeting is not required. We worked really hard to get that to happen, and I was stunned that I understand it's not law, but we have a lot of policies, and it would prove to be very favorable, especially eliminating a lot of the confusion, the questions, the frustrations prior to the public hearings for things. Why is that even in there? Why is that change happening?
We don't intend to change anything how we do. We still intend to keep neighborhood meetings. It's just a procedural aspect, meaning that if something happens, see, when it's in the code right now and it says the city or the applicant will, if something happens to that process, then we are procedurally could get challenged.
But I can see this being the get out of jail free card, where people no longer can pull this up and say we don't have to have neighborhood meetings. They just were so positive that I was surprised at this, that you would take that away. Yeah. So is there another option that's available that would be in between? And I don't know if there is, but I just think that's a mistake. And I don't believe it would halt it. I think that it should be required, and then it would be up to your judgment as city staff. If it doesn't happen for a reason or whatever, that's your call, and we would respect that. But it still needs to be required, because it didn't happen before you required it. And I'm just afraid it will go back to not happening. And it was, if the effects weren't so positive, I wouldn't be addressing it, but it was.
We're happy to continue to look at that.
Okay.
But keep in mind that ordinance language for having neighborhood meetings did not exist prior to January 20th of this year.
Correct.
So we were having neighborhood meetings even without the zoning, without that language.
All right. I would still ask you to think about that one more time. Thank you.
Commissioner Tallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine's more of a comment than a question. Ryan, I just want to commend you and the staff for staying in front of the recently adopted zoning changes that we made by bringing this to us. I think you guys are doing a great job. Obviously, it's just going to help you guys at the staff level, us here, and then when we make those recommendations to council, I think it's a very good move. And again, that you're staying in front of it, I think this is great. I'm sure this is not the last time we'll go through this, but it's a work in progress, and we knew that. So I just want to say good job to you and the staff.
Thank you. We appreciate
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. Ryan, I agree with Susan Lemmers down there. And a lot of the time that neighbors have come in front of us to voice their disappointment or dissatisfaction with what's going to happen has been directly related to their attendance at a neighborhood meeting. And then couple that with the need for courtesy notifications. I was kind of surprised to see that courtesy notices were also taken out. For the most part, it's my belief, just after being here for 3 or 4 years, that many of the residents of the city typically find out about what's going on or what's being proposed through the neighborhood meeting or through the courtesy notification. Without those, it seems to be a little restrictive, and it's almost like we don't want you to know what we're doing until we do it, unless you invite criticism, opposition, or folks to voice their opinions. I personally would like to see both of those back in the ordinance, and I mean, if I have to ask for an amendment at this point in time, I think I'd like to. I don't know if there's anybody else here that's in agreement with me, but I would certainly like to see an amendment if that's possible.
I would just like to reiterate, we intend not to change how we proceed. We intend to keep courtesy notices, right? This is just to prevent basically illegal blocking. Literally, I was in a deposition that questioned, that pulled out, looked at envelopes on if I mailed every single person within this radius. I could say,
Would it help to have Mr. Heyer come up here and without doing a case study, maybe explain to the commission why this is something that is protecting the city legally?
my
Or do we
suggestion,
not?
and that's fine. What I'd like to do is at least talk with legal, and then maybe, since these, now I know where your mind is,
Sure.
that we could work a little
Can
bit.
address that at our
And then-
next meeting.
Yeah, at the next meeting.
I'm good with
If you
that.
find an amendment is appropriate at that time, that's fine.
I appreciate that.
I have another point. This is totally, it doesn't concern the notifications. I live in a neighborhood where a number of people have come to me complaining about the height limitation in the Elmore Corners. Now, it's my understanding that the neighborhood has taken this, right now it's set at 120 feet. Their argument is that there's no place in the city that we've got a 120-foot building. They have brought it to the attention of Councilman Kluhl. They have talked with Mr. Berger about it. I was approached today by one of the members of the neighborhood who took a look at what our agenda was and took a look, went down to the Elmore Corners and saw that the 120 foot is still there. I guess my question is that since a number of people have brought it to the attention of staff, brought it to the attention of legal, brought it to the attention of the aldermen, who've all said that they willing to do something about it, why there's no change currently?
Well, there was no direction in the department to amend that section of the code at this time, so.
So you didn't hear anything from
No,
Councilman Kluhl?
I'm aware of the conversations, but
Well, I mean, since everybody that lives up there is against it,
I
since
don't know
there's,
that everybody up there that lives up there is against it.
okay, well, a good portion of the people have confronted me with it, that's all.
I don't know that.
Okay.
I think we're walking down a slippery slope here. If those people have an issue, then they need to come here. You should not act as their representative.
Okay, I'm not trying to do that. I'm sorry.
Understood.
I'm done.
Thank you. Any additional questions of Ryan? Seeing none?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anybody in the audience like to step forward and speak either side of this? Thank you, Ryan.
Good evening. My name's Adam Seitz. I'm here with the local home builders in town. First of all, I want to say thank you to staff's time and efforts in trying to get this zoning situation corrected. I think that there were some unintended circumstances by the zoning law that was put in place that we think that we can correct and try and get things right. You know, some of the details of the new ordinance did have some unintentional effects on building in the city. So I'm going to go over just a couple points here that Ryan kind of briefly touched on about a proposed point system, and I'll just keep it brief and we can go over it in a later meeting. But just wanted to bring it to your attention of what we've met with staff and a few council members and had some positive feedback so far. So, like I said, we do believe that the reason for the ordinance changes has been to, you know, build better looking homes in the city. Avoiding some big just garage walls and kind of making the homes have a better curb appeal. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with this point system as well. Two of the major factors that we've had problems with when going into turn-in permits that actually have been turned down in the city with the new zoning ordinances have been the garage width requirements and the glazing out front, which is the 15% transparency problem. It has actually made good sellable floor plans unbuildable in the city that have been turned down. So what we've kind of proposed is a point system, and we believe that giving point values to different design standards would accomplish the goal of what the city's trying to do with the zoning ordinance. Whether it's, you know, more stone, more brick, more glass in the front of the house to kind of doll up the front to accomplish the goal of what the zoning ordinance was meant to put in place. So some of the higher point value systems, or point value items for design factors we figure are masonry, your bricks, your stone, your stuccos, you know, covered porches, glass features, which he talked about. 15% transparency is very difficult to reach in some of the floor plans that are out there. Gables with higher pitches and dormers as well. So what we had met with city staff, a few council members, and also the Home Builders Association is a 20-point system to qualify for a building permit. This is just the first stab at a scale of a point system of what we feel would be a good starting point to qualify for a home to receive a permit in the city. And, you know, there are a lot of homes that are being built currently right now that don't tally up to the 20-point system. This is a home at 1227 Waverly that's to be built in this city that has a glass rating of 15%, but it doesn't have much curb appeal, and with a few extra things, with not a huge dollar amount, we could reach that 20-point system to try and kind of doll these things up and reach the goal of what this zoning ordinance was meant to do. So this home, we figure if you put a little bit of stone or a gable or something on it, it would get to the point system minimum requirement and would then be able to get the permit. It's another example of a home to be built in the city. It does have some of the higher point totals, but it is just shy of what the 20-point minimum system would require. So if we were to add some shake on it or some vertical siding or a dormer over the right-hand side, it would reach the minimum requirement to obtain the permit in the city. This is a home to be built in the city of Davenport right now currently, and this is one of the highest point totals that we have seen with design features. This one would equal up to 52 points, but with the new garage requirement as written currently, this would not qualify for a permit. So with the garage width, the way that it stands, the requirements are taking the width of the garage, excluding the center areas, only the doors themselves. The house to the side of the garage would have to equal that same distance. So the lots that are already slated and platted in the city of Davenport right now currently would not take a home with this width. So what we're proposing, here's another example as well of another floor plan that's been sold in the city before, but now with the new zoning ordinance would no longer qualify for a permit. So you can see with the garage width being 32 feet and the rest of the house only being 20 feet, you'd have to add another 12.5 feet onto this home for it to qualify for a permit. So with that being said, a lot of the lots that are already developed, platted, it would not take this house, and it would add substantial square footage to the house and price as well, which, disqualifying it from a permit would be, pretty tough when it's a good-looking, sellable floor plan in the city already. So what we propose for, and that's only on third-car garages. So two-car garages, there's no requirement currently set in the zoning ordinance. So what we propose for obtaining a permit with the third-car garage would be upping the minimum point value to 25 points to obtain the third-car garage. So it would require even a little more gingerbreading or, upping the face value of the point system to kind of up the level of standard. And we believe that's what the real zoning ordinance was meant to do, is to up the level of building in the city of Davenport from what they look like from streets, and really give some more wow factor than what could be currently built right now. So this is just a jumping off point. We've had some good feedback from city staff and some council members as well, but we just appreciate the opportunity to try and get it right at this point.
I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to step forward? Seeing none. Commissioners, any final questions at this time? Commissioner Manus.
Thank you. I just have a question for staff or perhaps Mr. Seitz. Is this point system something that you have observed work well in other communities, and did you have a template or a model you were drawing on to come up with the system?
Well, I can just say that using a point system to achieve design quality is not uncommon. Davenport has not done that in the past, but it's if not common, it's not uncommon to see that in other codes. And I think basically what's been presented, I think will be workable administratively.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schneider.
Matt, what prompted the city to adopt this new ordinance?
That's a big question. Basically, our existing code dated back to the 70s, had been incrementally amended in a very piecemeal fashion over time, so it became kind of a Frankenstein monster, very difficult to administer, parts that didn't relate to one another, and mainly since the code was adopted, the city's comprehensive plan had been updated many times with a major effort in 2005. And you go back to the 2005 comp plan, talked a lot about we need to basically up our game in terms of the quality of our built environment. That was a goal in that plan. I think that was reiterated in the 2016 update. So I think that, in a nutshell, kind of laid the groundwork for the code and the reasoning in broad terms for the types of design attention in the new code that didn't occur before the new code was adopted.
I have one other question. How would the 20-point system affect, like, starter homes, building of new, smaller homes for that price range?
Yeah, it would apply, and I think I think some would argue that a 15% transparency might be even more challenging to achieve. That's easier to apply to a traditional house without an attached garage, but when you have a garage attached, and that's really how we worked with the home builders to kind of develop this system of what exactly are you looking for, city, and as Adam mentioned, is a little bit higher design, and that's just only applying to the front facade facing the street, not to the other side. So we still think starter homes could be built applying some of these minimal treatments in order to get up to that point system. And over the next couple weeks, we're going to kind of hash out what that is and be able to present that to you. But I think we want to try and deter just, you know, a plain sided house with just a couple of windows. We are looking to, the entire zoning ordinance has a much greater emphasis, as Matt mentioned, on design. And so we're really just trying to up the design when you view it from the street.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, we will close case number ORD 19-08. It will also return to us in a couple weeks. Roll call for our regular meeting agenda.
Connell's excused. Hepner.
Here.
Ingram.
Present.
Johnson.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Lammers.
Present.
Manus.
Here.
Med.
Here.
Bransgard.
Here.
Reinhardt.
Here.
Tallman here. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. Report of City Council activity.
I will point out under the first item, this was the rezoning request at 4607 North Pine that the commission voted against, did fail to get past the first reading. The vote was 5-5. With your negative recommendation, a super majority vote, or 8, would 8 votes from the council would have been required to move the case on. I'm not going to say 5 voted to deny and 5 voted in favor. It's at, you know, the way the zoning works at the council. It's, does it move to the second and then ultimately the third reading before there's an actual vote? So that that did fail to move forward, and everything else did, and nothing else to report.
Thank you, Matt. Secretary's report.
Second.
All in favor of Secretary's report as printed, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it will say report of comp plan, Matt.
Again, nothing specific. We've been really focusing on trying to get the zoning ordinance right. There may be, I know there is interest in of moving forward what we're calling the Mid-Brady sub-area plan that was identified in the 2016 council update. So you may be hearing more about that in the upcoming months.
Thank you, Matt. Moving on to zoning activity, there's no old business, but one new business item. Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, this will be public hearing for case REZ 19-08, request to rezone 3870 Rockingham Road from R-4C Single and Two Family Central Residential District to SOS Special Open Space District. From the Fairmont Cemetery and Crematory Association is the petitioner.
Thank you. Motion.
This? Oh, am I in the wrong spot?
No, you're good. Just need to
Matt Flynn, Community
Hold
Planning.
on, we don't have a motion yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's got to be a recommendation somewhere. All right, here we go.
No.
No, it's not it either. Hold on.
Somebody else got a hand? I swear it was in the right place.
This.
There we go.
I think I just passed it. 1908. Yeah, it's a recommendation.
Okay.
Got it.
All right. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the listed findings and forward case REZ 19-08 to the City Council with recommendation for approval, including the following conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case number REZ 19-08's been moved and seconded. Now it's you, Matt.
And I'm still Matt Flynn, Community Planning. Again, we reviewed this, had our public hearing last meeting. Basically, the crux behind this is to allow Fairmount to build a new maintenance building in close proximity to the existing crematory and existing offices. Their current structure is in bad shape, located well away, and you know, I think as we've heard from the operators that this would actually not only improve the security situation, but actually lead to some efficiencies. Again, just we'll go quickly through land use. Again, like so many of our rezoning requests, this is on the edge between our residential general and then that special zoning classification and designation in the plan of open space. Again, the crematory, you can read up on, even on Wikipedia, has a pretty interesting history. One of the first crematories located west of the Mississippi. I'm sure Carvel Morgan can tell you a lot more, but we're focused on zoning. But one of the things we wanted to make sure is that this new maintenance building does not detract from, you know, the historic structures. So when we get to some of the conditions, you'll see they're kind of design oriented. So again, we'll go right to the recommendation. You see the 3 findings: consistency with the comp plan, allowing the cemetery to improve its operations, and we think with the conditions, you know, they're again designed to negate any negative impacts to surrounding properties. So you know, the first condition, the agreement not to sever, not to bore you with kind of legal and subdivision details, but since this is the maintenance building would be considered an accessory structure, you must have a principal structure on a lot in order to have an accessory structure. But by filing this agreement not to sever document with the county, you're basically saying that this residential lot, the subject property, is not separated from the overall crematory. We talked about size with the Morgans, and they are confident that they don't need a building greater than 32 by 48 square feet. That makes sense to move the building as far back to the north as possible. We talked about, do we actually just say up to the required setback lines? I don't think that's practical, because as a previously developed site, there may be some surprises underground, but we would like to see the building move back. We talked about color, and we're confident that given the manufacturer that he's working with, there's a number of good color combinations, but rather than saying, oh, it's got to be in an earth tone, or it's got to be brown or beige or whatever, we just want to make sure that it's not an overly bright or highly reflective surface material. Security lighting, shielded from the property to the east, that there be no long-term storage of materials or equipment outside, and like any development, making sure we go through site plan approval to make sure that you know, stormwater is being adequately directed and whatnot, meets other requirements. So with that, I have no other comments. Again, recommend approval. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Commissioners, any questions? Thank you, Matt. Would the petitioner like to speak at all? It's not required. Just asking. Do the commissioners have any questions of the petitioner? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Hepner.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Lammers.
Yes.
Manus.
Yes.
Med.
Yes.
Bransgard.
Yes.
Reinhartz.
Yes.
Tallman, yes. Motion carries.
That would conclude the zoning activity. We'll move on to subdivision activity. Commissioner Lammers.
He's queuing you up.
queuing it up. Subdivision activity, old business, there is none. New business, we have 2 cases. Case P19-02, request of Riverside Real Estate Holding LLC for a preliminary plat for a 4-lot subdivision on .75 acres, more or less, of property located at the southeast corner of West 53rd Street and Marquette Street. And staff recommends the Plan and Zoning Commission accept the listed findings and forward case P19-02 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval subject to the listed 4 conditions, and I so move.
Case number P19-02 has been moved and seconded for discussion.
Just this is for to facilitate 2 single-family attached homes. In the new code, we call it single-family semi-attached, and so this and they're both related. So that would facilitate that development.
Is there a reason why the petitioner is not present?
Typically, for a plat, it's not a public hearing.
Understand.
So I think he asked me, and I said, not necessarily for you to come.
As long as you're in communication. Appreciate it, Matt. Any questions? Commissioner Lammers.
Is this something we addressed a while ago, and they're just now moving on this?
Correct. There was a rezoning. I believe it was in 2018.
Right.
Or
Correct.
Could have been earlier, but there were some conditions associated with the rezoning. Those carried forward into the new zoning ordinance, in particular to the design. I've included that in the packet, but those did carry forward into the new zoning ordinance.
And did the safety question of it, the access to the area back from 53rd Street,
Yes.
when they turn, it's not just right there, it's down a ways?
Yes, that's part of the concept plan that's carried forward into the new zoning ordinance. Additionally, we were requiring a plat condition that says the driveway has to be located a minimum distance from that intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Johnson,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Lammers,
Yes.
Manus,
Yes.
Med,
Yes.
Ransgard,
Yes.
Reinhardt,
Yes.
Tolman, yes, and Hepner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Alrighty. Second case, case F19-11, request of Riverside Real Estate Holding LLC for a final plat for a 4-lot subdivision on .75 acres, more or less, of property located at the southeast corner of West 53rd Street and Marquette. Staff recommends Plan and Zoning Commission accept the listed findings and forward case F1911 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval subject to the listed 7 conditions, and I so move.
Case number F19-11 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Ryan?
Just here for any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner, no. Commissioner, no. Okay. Commissioners, any questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Schneider,
Yes.
Lammers,
Yes.
Manus,
Yes.
Med,
Yes.
Ransgard,
Yes.
Reinhardt,
Yes.
Tolman, yes, Hepner,
Yes.
and Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
That concludes subdivision activity.
Thank you, Commissioner Lammers. We move on to future business. Matt?
I will only mention you will see some rezoning efforts on Rockingham Road elsewhere in the corridor will be presented as a preview item next time. Potential public hearing on July 31st. So,
Thank you, Matt. Any communications? Anybody in the audience like to speak? Seeing none, any other business? Commissioners? Seeing none? All in favor of adjournment, signify by aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you for your attendance. Please drive home safely.